making a video. It's very sunny, hot. Anyway, tired, have a headache. Anyway, I was thinking to talk about, the consumption, reproduction part, but it's a little bit obvious. Maybe I'll save that for another day. Do this hard problem of consciousness thing again. Why? How? And it's just, I don't have anything new, I don't think. I just figured I'll opine on it some more, just to rub it in. I don't think it's really that hard a problem in terms of just recognizing the fact of its existence and saying that, it has components that are necessary to its function. It's not non-functional. Obviously, having this capacity to feel does make the device functional in terms of being able to do the whip carrot thing, being able to do the, as I've stated in a previous video, the idea that there could be a problem out here. Something could be on fire. An old lady could be on fire. Now, it doesn't say problem, put the old lady out. It doesn't say there's suffering happening, fix it, do something. It just is. And our brain has to make it a problem for us to do something about it, kind of a thing. And it's sort of as if you could understand how there'd be an advantage for you to learn the difference between, let's say, your mother and, Hitler's mother. And that if there was two old ladies on fire, two old ladies, that it would be important to put your mother out maybe, and not so much Hitler's mother. Kind of a thing. That there'd be a difference. And that you'd have to learn each generation, who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. And, that's sort of what evolution has done in producing this actively, continually maturating, continually learning, interactor machine. And that's kind of what our brain is able to do, is to create visceral, immediate responses, to circumstances that our brain identifies and labels with value. And I'd say it's fundamental to the process of logic to be able to reward when your brain adds up the truth correctly, or adds up some facts correctly, and when it gets them incorrect, and you have that dissonance problem. It needs to give you a sense of guilt, a sense of fear, some kind of indicator that what you're thinking of doing, or what you've done, wasn't the right plan, and that in future some other plan should be executed, and you should think better. You made a mistake somewhere, that kind of thing. Right, so the idea of our awareness and this processing thing is just where this mixing of sensation and identification sort of takes place, where the things in the real world are being represented in our brain, and they're being represented, complexly, in the sense that it's not just a rock, it's a rock in Inmendham, and, that kind of thing, the context. Seeing the fire, recognizing fire might be bad. You see what's on fire, you see how fast the wind's blowing. These are all conditions that add up to, that trigger a sense of good or bad, needs fixing, needs improving, or is sufficient, can be ignored. Some of my eyes gaze. Piro thinks this is a superpower. You know, we need quantum mechanics to do this, to gaze at the world, and for our brain to identify patterns that it recognizes as sometimes significant, or significantly unusual combinations of circumstances. You know, fire on the stove, coming out of the little burner, fire in the sink. Our brain would recognize, no, fire in the sink doesn't fit. There's a problem there. It will react. So some of these mechanisms of labeling the world are done by the really crude reflexes. So you could say certain kinds of sensations, like pain, you don't have much choice about programming those. Your life experience beyond acclimation to a misery, you know, beyond your psychology just becoming used to something being there all the time. You know, pain is just sort of there. You don't really have to learn how to have pain, you know, that is uncomfortable. So you could argue like too much heat or too much pressure, you know, punctures. These are really mechanical responses that you don't have much say in terms of the biology is already saying it for you. You don't have to do any learning. That this is the basic structure, and the basic structure will be first protected. Then when it comes to other mechanisms of desire, these are different kinds of more complex sensations, in the sense that it's a sensation that sometimes just tugs you along. It's not like a pain, it's just a playing with your ability to be repulsed in a sense. So it kind of is a little jabbing or a dotted line kind of a misery. And you could argue that the higher the frequency of the dotted line is somehow, you know, relates to the discomfort of the deprivation. So you could say a little bit of hunger is kind of fun. It's a little dotted line where it sort of jabs you with a little bit of pain, and you get this instantaneous relief of the jabbing going away. And so it's this kind of inverted pleasure mechanism, because you're rewarded mentally for solving a problem that wasn't existing and that you didn't solve. You know, it's just it's kind of goes away on its own kind of thing. But it just kind of compels you to answer the call, so to speak, and say, I'm hungry. And if I eat food, this I've learned through experience, I'll be rewarded with even more of this gratification, with this comfort. And that the comfort is probably, it's just my explanation, the comfort is probably just made out of that reward. The fixing of problems, you know, sensation, tightness or tension or stress. So that eating is a stress reliever, a tension reliever. And that's where we're deriving the pleasure from. So before you satisfy the hunger, it's just playing with tension, making you a little more tense, relieving tension, a little more, a little less, a little more. And but if you satisfy the hunger, you'll be given a bonus of tension relief that'll give you even a more euphoric or liberated sense. You'll be relieved in a sense of miseries you didn't even know you had. You know, that your normal state is not comfortable. It's, you know, full of little tensions that through existence you become invisible to your conscious perception. You don't really recognize the sense of the weight. I guess I would argue that as you get older, you start to feel more of that noise that's always there. Gravity seems heavier. You're much more aware of the thickness of the regular soup, you know, you're swimming through. So anyway, so this is the mechanism, in a sense, of from the evolutionary perspective. That's why it exists. But it doesn't explain the mechanism, physical. And that one may elude, you know, our perceptual grasp for a while, because I think it's constructed in a non-existent plane, in a sense of it's being constructed as an illusion. The mechanics that are creating the illusion are real. There's real pigeons shoved up the sleeve, so to speak, or there's real lines on the paper that our brain screws up or reinvents. But just like my image of this world is illusionary in the sense that my brain has painted the colors on it. You know, my brain has created layers of identifiable depths. It's just another way of building a model. So you could almost argue that anytime you translate something into something else, you're making an unreal copy. But the unreal copy can be, in some ways, more real than the reality, because the brain has added so much in terms of identifying elements and, in a sense, exaggerating them or making them giving them greater contrast, or representing them based on some sort of idea of importance. And that's sort of what our brain is doing. It's translating photons bouncing off of objects in a representative pattern, and it's converting them into an internal representation of that complexity, of that arrangement of material atoms in space. And that representation, our brain has added more texture to it, an identifiable texture. And so, like color, that's our brain's representation of a frequency, our brain represents by creating a sense, a sensation, a feeling, value-weighted feeling, like a color except on a value scale. It identifies elements and applies the paintbrush of value as an emotional reaction. So we emotionally we add this layer of emotional reaction to reality, which is essentially giving something significance, recognizing its unusualness, right? Sometimes you see something just because it's unusual, and that's a property it actually has. Things that are unusual have a property. It's a completely invisible property unless you have a model. Unless you have a model that goes through time and makes it possible for you to understand that over time this arrangement is very unusual. So if I see 5 dice standing on top of each other with the number 5, I can understand that isn't the way it happens, because I know the pattern history. Yeah, that's a pretty good explanation. So there's so much it's a kind of a deep subject in terms of the volume of information you can, the amount of stuff you can talk about. So it will take some more work. What a weird place for a skunk cabbage. Yeah, anyway, next time. That's unusual, so that's why my brain said that ain't supposed to be there. Because my brain recognized something and painted it with unusualness. And but it's all an illusion. The place where it did the painting is not in reality. It didn't paint the actual thing. It painted a mental interpretation of the thing. Alright, that's probably enough. Until next time.